All right, there we go. Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, whether you're tuning in live or watching the replay. Thank you all so much for showing up for yourself today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Darlene Garcia, and I will be the presenter for today's workshop. This is the third part of my Shatter the Silence series conducted in support of Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. So today we're going to specifically talk about sexual harassment and sexual assault in the workplace, college campuses, and the military. But a little bit about me before I move on. I am an advanced grief recovery specialist. I am also a certified wellness coach. I think even more importantly, I am a childhood sexual assault survivor. And so it's one of the reasons that I decided to dedicate this entire month to support awareness of sexual assault. But it's also important for me to do my part by planting the seed of awareness. You know, this little bit of effort can help, right? It can help in reducing sexual violence in my community, in your community, and hopefully spread globally, right? I also need to lead by example for my 9 grandchildren. Yes, I have 9 grandchildren. And, you know, my biggest fear is that my grandbabies will experience what I went through or worse. And so protecting them starts with teaching and inspiring others to take those blinders off, right? To be aware, to learn prevention and safety, and to cultivate safer communities for the future of our children and our grandchildren. I always start off my workshops with a disclaimer. So it's important for everybody to know that, again, I am a grief recovery specialist and a wellness coach. I am not a doctor. I'm not a licensed clinician, such as a psychologist, psychiatrist, a therapist, or a counselor. The tips and tools that I share with you today and in the previous workshops are not guaranteed to take away your pain or to guarantee your safety, right? It's all about your active participation in doing the things that you need to do to keep yourself safe, and also active participation in your healing if you are a sexual assault survivor or victim, right? So healing results are not guaranteed, okay? Your participation is where you will see your results. I'm also not claiming to be an expert in procedures and systems or processes in the military or in corporate America or on college campuses. My experience does come from the HR field. I was working in corporate America for almost 25 years, and about 9 years of that was in HR. And one of my roles as an HR manager was investigating harassment cases within my organization. So I definitely have some expertise in this area. But again, I'm not claiming to be the expert in any of these areas. My sole purpose here is to really help people to look at things maybe from a different perspective. And again, to plant that seed so that you can go out there and start being an active participant in making sure that sexual violence does not happen in your communities or even within your families or your homes, okay? The other thing that I like to do before I begin talking about the topic at hand is to set the tone for safety and to get everybody ready for what I'm about to discuss, right? So I have these commitments for all of us to make, and you can just make them silently as I go through them. So the first one is to keep an open mind, right? Again, I'm going to be talking about things from a perspective that you may not have heard it before. So I'm just going to ask you to keep an open mind about the things that I will be sharing. The other thing is to be honest with yourself. And when I talk about honesty, it's really about emotional honesty. Sometimes the things that I talk about, because it's deep, can trigger some human emotions for people. So I want you to just be okay with feeling your human emotions. Acknowledge that this is how you're feeling, and this is the space that you're in this moment. The other commitment is to not judge or compare, right? Yourself for others. One of the things that we do when we especially compare is we minimize our own experiences. And then a lot of times judging is, just intellectualizing what we've been through. And again, a lot of it is being in touch with our human emotions and being okay and knowing that all of that is normal and natural. And that all encompasses being human, right? Just be human. If the tears flow, allow them to flow. Okay, just allow them to flow. Your cameras are off, so no one is going to see it, but I just want you to be safe and okay with acknowledging where you're at in this moment. Okay. Technical aspects of our commitments is to silence your devices, but I also ask you to keep yourself on mute. The reason I ask you to silence your devices is because I'm really going to whiz right through this presentation. I don't want you to miss anything, right? So if you could just give me your attention for about an hour today, I promise you that it'll be worth your time. There's going to be so much value that's going to come out of today's workshop. And then at the end, I'm going to shut off the recording. And I'm going to open it up for questions or for anyone that would like to share their story. So in this case, I would like to ask everyone to please just be respectful of others during that time. So there are several key things that I'm going to be talking about today. The first one is awareness. I'm going to break it down between sexual harassment, sexual assault, and then breaking it down between the different areas, right? In the workplace, on college campuses, and in our military. Then I'm going to talk about the impact on survivors. There's so many aspects of sexual harassment and sexual assault that impact victims and survivors, and I'm going to be talking about that as well today. And then I'm going to move on to prevention and doing our part, right? So spreading awareness, doing the things that we need to do to help others, and then doing our part in not only keeping ourselves safe, but making sure that others around us are also safe. And then I'm going to share some resources with you, right? As I've been doing these workshops and really diving into Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I've also been doing a lot of research. Again, I don't claim to be an expert in many of these things. I just am very passionate about helping others, and my expertise really comes from an emotional healing perspective. So a lot of this other stuff, I made sure that I researched so that I can give you guys the best information out there that I was able to gather, okay? So let's first talk about the difference between sexual harassment versus sexual assault. So sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination that violates under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, okay? I'm not sure if any of you have heard of Title VII, but it covers all types of harassment, not just sexual harassment, okay? Sexual harassment may be illegal in the context of your employment, while not necessarily being illegal under the criminal law. Sexual assault occurs when you are the victim of intentional physical contact that is sexual in nature without your consent. In my first workshop, I covered the different forms or the different faces of sexual assault. And if you weren't able to attend that workshop and you'd like a replay, just send me an email and I'll be happy to send that to you. Sexual assault is considered to be a criminal offense versus sexual harassment, which is a civil offense that is committed against another person regardless of their employment. So it doesn't matter where you work or where you go to school. If you've been sexually assaulted, that is a criminal offense, okay? So let's first talk about sexual harassment, okay? There are two types of sexual harassment. The first one is called quid pro quo, and then the next one is hostile work environment. So quid pro quo involves a supervisor, chain of command, a professor, or anyone in a leadership position. Okay, a hostile work environment occurs when an employee is subjected to unwelcome physical or verbal conduct of a sexual nature. And it can also include written conduct, okay? So while quid pro quo, I always get tongue-tied, while quid pro quo harassment is relatively straightforward, hostile work environment claims can be more difficult to detect. In my experience in HR, I can tell you that, in many of the sexual harassment cases that I investigated, it was really tough, even for me as the investigator, trying to be, the the lawyer for both sides, the judge, the jury. It was not a very good experience for me. I'm not going to lie. It was very challenging. I had to represent the company, but I also had to represent the employee. And it just is really difficult to be able to do something like that and to have a result where everybody wins. In my experience, and I don't know if any of you here have ever worked in HR or have been a leader in a corporate environment, but sexual harassment cases, usually when they are resolved, they're not really resolved. Not to the point where any side was satisfied. And that's because we miss a component in sexual harassment investigations, right? Nothing against human resources divisions of any corporation or organization, but everything has been the way it is for so many years, right? And so the black and white, the processes, the systems that we have to follow in order to ensure that we kind of set the status quo, if you will, within an organization, leaves the victim and even the perpetrator kind of left hanging in many different ways. So, I'm going to talk about how we as individuals can be better equipped so that if you were to be involved in something like that in your environments, that you take active participation in what you need to do to make sure that the things that need to get done so that you can still enjoy the quality of your life and make the choices that you need to make within your organizations, you're able to do that because you're able to heal from a perspective that is not necessarily provided within your organizations, okay? So quid pro quo, the first two bullet points here on the slideshow: conditions of employment for sexual favors and conditions of advancement for sexual favors. This can be either explicit or implicit. What do I mean by that? Right. So let's say a boss of yours or a professor offers to take you out for dinner, right? He knows that you're up for a promotion and he wants to talk about that. Didn't say that if he takes you on this dinner, you agree to go, that you are automatically going to get this promotion, right? It's implied. That is what implicit means. It's understood or it's implied. Now, if he says, if you go with me to dinner and we have a nightcap afterwards, I will guarantee that you will get that promotion. That is explicit, right? He is directly stating that he wants you to engage in dinner and a nightcap in order for you to get this promotion, okay? A hostile work environment could be the next several bullet points, right? So verbal harassment of a sexual nature, including things like joking, right? Sexual jokes, jokes that refer to sexual acts or even sexual orientation. Okay, those can be very offensive to people, whether it's the person that you're talking to or the people that are around that can hear, right? So that can be construed as verbal harassment. Unwanted touching or physical contact. I remember at an old job of mine, we had an employee that liked to come up to the ladies when they were sitting at their desk and massage their shoulders as they were working, and he would massage their shoulders as he was talking to them, right? How's your day? And whatever small talk that he was having with them. Some of the women actually were okay with it, right? They had, I guess, an okay relationship with him and liked the free massages. Most women didn't like it. It gave them the creeps. They would kind of like move his hands away like this. But to be honest with you, none of us really knew that something like that could be considered or qualify as sexual harassment or a hostile work environment, right? So again, hostile work environments are sometimes hard to detect. If you have a group of people that are okay with it and then another group that is not, we're going to have some friction in making a decision if it qualifies or not. The key though, you guys, the key to remember is that the person that felt uncomfortable, that it was unwanted towards them, it matters, right? It matters to them and it's uncomfortable and it leaves them feeling many different ways, right? It's a lot of human emotions that come up because of these unwanted touching or physical contact. I think most of you are from Guam, right? So we can talk about the culture, right? When you see somebody that you would automatically go up and you would kiss them on the cheek or you would give them a hug, right? Culturally, that's acceptable. But not everybody accepts it. And not everybody accepts it from every single person. And so sometimes, you have to be very aware of who it is that you're giving these hugs and these kisses to, and make sure that they're okay with that, maybe asking permission, if you will, right? But that can be perceived as unwanted touching, those hugs and those kisses. So I just wanted to put that out there so that you're aware that sometimes culturally it's okay, but in the environments of school or work, or even in the military, especially if there are people that it's not acceptable in their culture, it's not something that they do in their culture, that you need to be mindful of that. Okay, we all need to be mindful of that. The next one is discussing sexual topics, right? So when we think about sexual topics, it could be like someone talking about their partner and what they did the night before, or talking about fantasies or stories. Any type of sexual topics that come up is inappropriate in any of those environments, right? Whether you're at work or on a college campus or in the branches of the military, discussing sexual topics in those environments are inappropriate and unacceptable. I think I skipped one, right? Unwelcome sexual advances. So sexual advances actually can also fall under quid pro quo. So if it was, again, a leader, a supervisor, someone in your chain of command, your professor, and they, gave you some sexual advances that were unwelcome, it can fall under either category, whether it would be a hostile work environment or quid pro quo. So sexual advances include a wide range of verbal and physical conduct, and in some cases they may include statements like, asking you for a date or making uninvited remarks about your body. This again could be inappropriate when it comes to other people also around, and they are feeling that you are now making them feel like they're in a hostile work environment because it's making them uncomfortable as well, right? Unwanted sexually explicit photos, text messages, or emails. Circulating these things, right, through email or text messages, naked women, naked men, women in bikinis or shirtless men, those are also considered sexually explicit, and they could definitely be unwanted, right? It could also be sending someone text messages of a sexual nature or emails, right? As the key words, if you notice in many of these bullet points, is unwanted, right? Unwanted touching, unwelcome, unwanted sexually explicit photos, text messages, or emails. If it is unwanted, if the person feels uncomfortable and it's inappropriate to them, that it can be construed and qualify as sexual harassment in any of the environments that we're talking about today. Okay, you guys, there are so many other things that qualify for sexual harassment. I couldn't put them all on the slide. I put some of the main ones that are out there, maybe the more obvious ones. There's a lot that are probably not as obvious. And what I want to recommend to you is to make sure that you know your organization's policies and guidelines on sexual harassment in your organization. So important to understand it, read it, maybe even have a copy of it, highlight areas on there that you think that you need to have for reference for later. But yeah, there's so many other things that can qualify as sexual harassment, whether it be quid pro quo or a hostile work environment. So now I want to go and talk about sexual violence on campus. Now, what I'm talking about here, what are some of the challenges that our college students face when it comes to sexual violence, whether it is harassment or assault? Either way, it is still sexual violence, okay? So the first challenge that our students face is underreported cases, okay? So despite a federal law known as the Jeannie-Clary Act, which requires college campuses to notify every sexual assault case to the US Department of Education, colleges nationwide have admitted that they have underreported the number of cases within their schools. But the other challenge to it being underreported are the students themselves, right? Much of my research that I did on this stuff showed that students feared. They feared retaliation and or that they would not be believed, right? Or that their college wouldn't do anything to help them. There was also shame, right? They were ashamed because they couldn't remember all of the details of what happened. They sometimes second guess themselves, did it really happen? And so then they don't go and report it. That doesn't mean that it didn't leave them feeling a certain way, right? And it's always the part that we miss is how did it leave the victim or the survivor feeling? Okay. The other thing is vulnerability. College students are the most vulnerable group when it comes to sexual violence because they have the least amount of life experience. But I want to go on to say that, even though I'm not talking about it yet, but I want to go on to say that, you know, even those that join the military at such a young age, right? So a lot of high school students will either join the military, get a job, or attend a university, right? Still fresh out of high school, still don't have any life experiences. So, you know, when I did my research, colleges had the most, you know, sexual violence cases. The military said they had the most sexual violence cases. And so just depending on who was writing the article or where I looked to do the research, everyone was going to say that they had the highest numbers of sexual violence in this specific demographic. But we're talking about our college kids here, right? So the least amount of life experience leaves them vulnerable, right? They're excited, they're in college, right? These are college freshmen, they're invited to parties and they're meeting up with people that they've never known before. But oh my gosh, it's almost like, you know, they're looking up, they're idolizing, you know, the more senior students that have been going there for a while, right? Good looking, you know, just really out there, very popular. It's not much different from going to high school when you're coming in as a freshman, kind of that mentality that they have. And they're so trusting because they just want to be included, right? That inclusivity, you know, makes them even more vulnerable. So one of the things that I noticed in a lot of my research was that sexual violence on campuses was mostly found at the beginning of the school year, and studies show that it was mostly college freshmen, right? Again, they're the most vulnerable. The next challenge that our college kids face is the date rape drug. The date rape drug. Wow, guys. I've never experienced the date rape drug, but what I found found out about this drug is that it has no taste or no smell, no color, making it literally impossible to know if you've been drugged, right? The drug also makes a person weak and confused, even pass out, so that they're not able to defend themselves or to refuse sex, right? So the date rape drug is very common on college campuses. The other challenge that our college students face is social media and the internet effects, right? Technology, guys, technology plays a big role in today's sexual assault crimes. If you were on a little bit earlier and you were able to see the video that I showed from YouTube about the Me Too movement, you know, one of the things that makes sexual assault different in this era versus before the internet is exactly that. The internet, people could rally around and have this global movement versus before, when we didn't have that ability to be able to connect on this World Wide Web. But on the flip side of that, social media and the internet also can negatively impact what happens and also increase the sexual violence that happens out there, right? What are some of the things that happen on social media and the internet? Sexting, video voyeurism, recording someone without their knowledge and then posting it online, right? These things can go viral within seconds, right? Not even minutes, but within seconds, right? So people have the ability to literally slam someone on the internet versus before we had the World Wide Web, before the digital era ever came into our space, right? You can call someone a slut or easy, or show, again, naked pictures of them or them having sex with someone else. And it is so quick for it to go viral, especially on a small campus, in a matter of seconds, okay? In a matter of seconds. The last challenge that our college students could possibly face is what we call domination and power. This derives a lot from different cultural beliefs that men have more power over women and that women like to be dominated. So the sexual act itself sometimes is not about sex, but about power and domination. And I found that one really actually quite interesting, because I had no idea that that was even, you know, that could be one of the reasons that people would do that. And I just found that to be such a harsh reality that kind of hit me really quickly. Again, there is probably a lot more things that college students are faced with, that are challenged with when it comes to sexual violence on campus. And so, you know, again, so much research out there. The World Wide Web is at our fingertips. If you are a college student and you want to learn more about these things, then I encourage you to go online. There's so much resources and information out there that can give you many different reasons why someone could be sexually assaulted or harassed on a college campus. Now I want to talk about military sexual assault, okay? So according to the Department of Defense, sexual assault is defined as intentional sexual contact characterized by use of force, threats, intimidation, abuse of authority, or when the victim does not or cannot consent. A sexual assault can occur without regard to gender or spousal relationship or age of the victim. And sexual assault must involve physical contact. So a little bit different in the military, because if you were looking at the rest of the world outside of the military, sexual assault does not have to be physical contact, right? There are many different forms of sexual assault. I mentioned those, like I said, on my first workshop, and some of it did not involve physical contact, but in the military, it specifically says that it must involve physical contact. So the DoD concluded that sexual harassment is a leading factor. Okay, it's a leading factor affecting the unit climate on sexual assault. So it starts off by being harassed and eventually can lead to sexual assault. The majority of victims were harassed by someone in their chain of command. Okay, again, this is all information that I got from the Department of Defense website. The majority of victims were harassed by someone in their chain of command, and veterans from all eras of service, from World War II, those who served more recently in Iraq and Afghanistan, have reported experiencing military sexual trauma, or what they nickname or acronym MST. So what are some of the challenges that our service members face when it comes to military sexual assault? The first one is cases are alarmingly high, right? I said that about the colleges. The colleges also said that they have the highest number of sexual violence. And then when I did more research, the military said that they had the higher cases, right? So I'm not going to be sharing any numbers here, guys. The data, to me, is not important for two reasons. Number one, the data is different depending on what you're looking at, depending on who brought this data together, right? So their data is all going to be different. The other part to that is, I don't think it matters, right? Whether it's 1 or 1,000. Human beings are not statistics, they're people, right? So even if one person got sexually assaulted, that's one person that their entire life is affected by that sexual violence, right? So I don't pay attention a lot to the data. Also, it's disturbing, right? When you look at it, because a lot of the numbers are really high. But then you read other stuff that says the numbers are skewed and they're a little bit lower because of unreporting. So if you think about the unreporting, well, the numbers are this high and there's so much more percentage of unreported. I can't even imagine what that looks like, right? And that's the next thing, the challenge. Vast majority of cases go unreported, right? So why is that? Why do they go unreported? There's many different reasons why something goes unreported. And the research that I did, it wasn't just the military, it's in the colleges, it is people in general that had such a hard time reporting cases. And I actually brought that up in my last workshop about why cases go unreported, actually the last 2 workshops. So again, I can send you the replay on those things. But some of those reasons are shame. Some of them are retaliation, right? That's the next one here. Retaliation is another reason why these cases go unreported. People are afraid. They fear for their lives. They fear for their jobs. They fear that they're going to be blamed, right? Victim blaming is another reason these cases go unreported. And then that date rape drug isn't just in the colleges. They can be used anywhere. The military also uses that drug for new recruits that come into the military and they're out partying, right, with some of the other people within the service. And so that date rape drug is available to everybody, right? Not just our college students. So retaliation is a big reason why these cases go unreported. The other thing about it going unreported is they're also afraid of being discharged, right? And in fact, it's been proven that when service members report sexual assault in the military, they have been discharged. Not everybody, but an alarmingly high number have been discharged, and typically within 7 months of making the report. And the victims received harsher discharges, with a lot of them being separated under less than fully honorable conditions compared to some of the other service members that are discharged for other reasons. Okay. Another reason for unreporting is the power imbalance. The majority of survivors were harassed by someone, again, in their chain of command, by someone in their chain of command, and kind of like in the workplace, right? A leader in the colleges, a professor, so someone in a higher status, in a leadership capacity. And then it leads again back to retaliation, right? So they all correlate or interlink with each other. The last challenge is low trust and satisfaction in the system. Over 1 in 4 victims who did not report feared retaliation, right, from their command or coworkers, and nearly 1 in 3 victims who did not report feared the process would be unfair or nothing would be done, right? So there's many different stories out there that you can find on the internet that survivors will tell you about, you know, their low trust or the satisfaction in the system because it happened to them. And so those stories also are shared with other people that have been sexually assaulted, and they fear that they're going to go through that same situation. So hence why they don't report what has happened to them. And many of the victims or survivors of military sexual assault really don't report it or don't come out with their story, don't give their stories a voice, don't go out and get any type of help or healing until after they've left the service. So let's talk now about the effects of survivors. And I am talking about this across all groups that we were talking about today. So whether it is survivors of sexual harassment in the workplace or harassment on college campuses or in the military, or sexual assault, right, which is a lot more severe than sexual harassment. So sexual harassment and sexual assault does not only impact the survivor over the short term, it can also have detrimental effects over a long period of time. Right? These effects are far-reaching and impact many aspects of a survivor's life, and I've got many of them up here. So I'm not going to go too much into depth with the first 3, the mental, physical, and emotional effects of survivors, because I actually talked about this in my last workshop, and I also talked about it in my first workshop. And then I'm going to talk about it a lot more in the 4th workshop that we're going to be having next week, because that is my area of expertise. I'm going to be focusing and going more in depth on that there. So really quickly, I'm just going to run through what are some of the things that survivors, how they're impacted from a mental, physical, and emotional perspective. So let's first talk about mental, right? When someone suffers from the mental effects of sexual harassment or sexual, let's just call it sexual violence, they could experience depression, anxiety, loss of focus, loss of clarity, loss of concentration, increased stress, and including PTSD. The physical impact that sexual violence can have on survivors can be a change in eating habits, getting severe headaches, change in sleep patterns, and numerous health conditions. And then the emotional impact that survivors can face is fear, confusion, anger, worry, all of these different human emotions overwhelmingly hitting them, sometimes all at once, right? So a huge rush of human emotions that affect people. And then it all leads back to the mental and the physical. So they all kind of, work hand in hand in how it affects survivors. And again, I'll talk about that a lot more in next week's workshop. So now let's talk about the financial impact on survivors, right? In cases of sexual harassment, this could mean losing a promotion, right, or a raise. If you were approached by a supervisor and you didn't get the promotion or you didn't get that raise because you said no to their sexual advances, that could, negatively impact your finances. We talk about our military service members and being, discharged, right? Just depending on what the what the policies say about the number of years that they served and if they were discharged honorably or dishonorably, right? Just really all depends, right? Do they get their veteran status? I mean, there's so many things that can be affected by that. You know, maybe they get out of the military early because they just don't want to deal with this anymore. They're scared for their life. And so that can heavily impact their finances. You know, college students, right? This can also impact financially. You know, they could be going to school for, you know, a really skilled type of job that was going to bring in a good financial future for them. And now they just can't focus. They can't concentrate. Maybe they fail their classes, right? So this can impact them there. It can impact survivors on a professional level, right? This goes hand in hand with financial, right? In your professional jobs, your professional careers, regardless of if it's in corporate America or you're going to school or you're in the military, it can impact you professionally, right? Your focus on work, right? You make mistakes. You isolate yourself from coworkers, from your fellow students, from your fellow service members. And the list goes on and on and on how it can negatively impact your professional status. Personal relationships. A lot of people don't realize how much this can impact personal relationships. And it's personal relationships from, you know, on two spectrums. The first one is the personal relationships that you have with family and you know, close friends, you know, maybe your significant other. But when you suffer from sexual violence in any form, the people that love and care about you also suffer effects, right? They could suffer feelings of guilt and you know, not feeling like they were able to protect you. Maybe they're in denial, and so now there's like this friction in the relationship because they can't believe that this happened to you, and you know, so now you're feeling resentful of the, you know, the people that you care most about because they're not in your corner, right? So personal relationships can be definitely impacted in many different ways when someone suffers from sexual violence. And then societal is a huge one, you guys. I'm not sure if you realize just how much the societal impact can have on survivors. Society plays a huge role in how sexual violence impacts our survivors or our victims. In much of the research that I've done, sadly, it's another harsh reality. I was really blown away at how much society really impacts how people report or don't report, the support that they get or the lack of. So I'm gonna go at this from something that I researched and I found out there, which is called rape culture, right? And rape culture is just the name of it, but it really does encompass sexual violence in all its forms. So what the rape culture means is that society normalizes and excuses sexual violence. And they do this through the media and pop culture. Through the media and pop culture, okay? A lot of that is predominantly towards women, unfortunately, right? Some examples of rape culture are victim blaming, right? Again, this is a huge reason why victims and survivors do not report, because they are blamed on the onset. Sometimes it's blaming themselves as well, right? The rape culture also trivializes sexual assault. How do they do that? You know, by saying things like, oh, boys will be boys, right? Sexually explicit jokes. We talked about that in sexual harassment and how that can be very inappropriate in the workplace. But it always starts at a young age. So imagine it starting first in the playground, and then in the boys' locker room, and then in the place of work or on college campuses, right? Boys will be boys. They're brought up to think like that. Sexually explicit jokes, tolerance of sexual harassment, right? It's tolerated. Why? It's uncomfortable. It's a lot of times hard to prove that it's been done. cultural beliefs will say, that's not sexual harassment, versus where others will say, yes, it is, because it was inappropriate and unwelcome to me. And so there's so much controversy around what is deemed to be sexual harassment or even sexual violence, right? I talked a lot about that in my last workshop when we talked about childhood sexual abuse and how cultural beliefs can really impact someone going through a sexual violent event and not even recognizing it as such because of what their culture believes. The other part to rape culture is the pressure on men to score, right? Think about that. You know, it's like peer pressure. And again, it starts at such a young age and then it just translates into adulthood. The rape culture also is teaching women to avoid getting raped, right? This rape culture always just says, women, protect yourselves, right? How about if we turn that around and said, how about we teach our boys at a young age to be more respectful so that they don't become abusers, rapers, perpetrators, right? And this is not to slam men in any way. If you were on my workshop last week, I talked a lot about how men and boys are also sexually violated, right? So sexual violence is not discriminatory when it comes to gender, okay? But it definitely is very predominantly women that are sexually assaulted. And it's really because of what we know, right? Most men, boys don't come out and talk about being raped or sexually abused or sexually assaulted because, again, of beliefs, cultural beliefs, societal beliefs that men need to be masculine. These things don't happen to men. So to be able to admit something like that to themselves or to anyone else is really harder for a male versus a female. All right, so that was a lot. That was a lot to digest. But now I want to talk about more of the positive stuff, right? So let's talk about prevention, right? How do we prevent, first of all, harassment? Okay, so the first one on this slide here is to be informed. Know what the definition of sexual harassment is, right? There's the definition when it comes to Title VII, right, of the law. And then there's definitions as defined within your organizations or your college campuses. And so you want to make sure that you're fully informed of what those definitions mean, depending on where your place of work or your school is at. Be knowledgeable, know what your organization's, so the same thing, know what your organization's school, branch of military, your policies are regarding sexual harassment. So not only the definition, but know your policies, right? Know what your policy says. Do your part, right? Do your part by taking an active role in fostering a work environment free from sexual harassment, right? I think it's important for all of us, right? Just as individuals to be active participants in making sure that we set the tone, even if it's just in our little circle, right? It spreads from there, right? So do your part in making sure that where you're at is free of a culture of sexual violence. Attend sexual harassment prevention training, right? Your organization should offer this, and many of them may also make it mandatory, right? Title VII says that corporations need to make sure that they have sexual harassment training for their employees. And I believe it's like every 2 years, at least when I was there. I don't know if that changed. So most of it is mandatory. But there's other trainings and courses that you can take on your own to be better equipped and to be more informed. And I encourage you to do that. When I worked, in corporate America, and I did these trainings as an employee, but also to make sure that everyone did it right. Because a lot of times I was a facilitator of these courses, of these trainings. We eventually moved to CBT, right? Computer-based training. And what was it? Click, click, click. You got to make it go for 2 minutes and then click, click, click. I mean, it was, most people would find that to be ridiculous and not really impact them in any way. It was boring. They didn't really pay attention. So we can ask questions, right, later on and have these group discussions and say, okay, what did you learn in that sexual harassment training that you just took? What does sexual harassment mean? What are some forms of sexual harassment? Most employees would not raise their hands because they had no idea. They never really watched it, right? So I want to come back to the part here where it said, do your part, right? Be an active participant, be knowledgeable, be more informed, make it important to you to understand exactly what sexual harassment is, right? Because you could also be that person that is innocently, right? You are not intentionally trying to be inappropriate or hurt someone. And it's just kind of one of those things, or you're just talking, you're laughing and you're joking. And now all of a sudden, someone reports you because they just said that you created a hostile work environment for them. And you had no intention of doing that, right? So know who you can talk to about certain things, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and just be mindful and take active participation in that role. Report harassment immediately. Even though we talked a lot about how things go unreported and all the reasons why they go unreported, I can't stress enough how much it's so important to have that courage to come forward and report harassment immediately, right? Report it to your supervisor. And if your supervisor is the harasser, then report it to a higher authority or report it to HR, or go to your government agency, whoever it is. But you shouldn't say you must, but you should. And I encourage you to report harassment immediately. Why? It's important to do that immediately because you're affected, right? Your whole being is affected mentally, physically, emotionally. Can't concentrate at work, right? You fear for your job, or you can't focus, and now your performance is being impacted. And who's going to be held accountable for these things if you don't report the harassment? More than likely you are, because no one ever knew that you were harassed. But now all of a sudden things start changing in your life, and not for the good, right? So report the harassment immediately. Have courage, right? Don't be afraid to report a comment, an action, a gesture by somebody that made you feel uncomfortable. Right? How do we do that? I know that in a lot of sexual harassment trainings, they say the first thing you should do is talk to the harasser directly and tell him or her that they made you feel uncomfortable. What they said was inappropriate, or what they showed was inappropriate. It's important for you to do things like that, right? But at the same time, I get it. It's not always easy to do that, right? So if you're not able to talk to the person directly, you don't have the courage, you don't feel comfortable doing it, then report it, okay? Seek support from people you trust, your family members, your friends, your colleagues, an outside professional, right? Seek some help. Don't hold on to this stuff, right? I'm going to talk about this a lot in next week's session, but doing these things alone does not serve you in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so seek support. And then the last one is document the harassment in writing as soon as possible, right? I investigated one sexual harassment case in my former job, and I was very impressed. I was very impressed with this employee's documentation. Literally, like, saved everything, like dates and screenshots of emails and text messages and witnesses, and it was incredible. She literally made my job easy. So document the harassment in writing as soon as possible. All right, so now let's talk about sexual assault and how can you protect yourself. I know we're coming up to the hour, so I'm gonna just ask you guys to just give me a few more minutes. We're almost here. We're gonna be wrapping this up quickly. So protect yourself from sexual assault. The first one is be aware of your surroundings, guys. If you are using earphones, avoid having both of them in your ears, right? If you don't know where you're going, walk with confidence anyway, and avoid walking and texting. So it is so common with our young generation to do that. And I won't lie, I catch myself sometimes doing that when I have to send a quick text message or a quick email, and I find myself walking and texting, and that is such a bad habit, right? So just please be aware of your surroundings. The next one is go to social gatherings with a friend. If you arrive with a friend, don't leave without your friend, right? The Marines motto is Semper Fi. You can use it too. It means stay loyal to your friends that you went to the party with. If your friend gets too intoxicated to stay at the party, take them home, leave no one behind, okay? Leave no one behind. Don't leave your drink unattended. An old school trick is to keep your drink safe by placing a napkin over your cup or your can or your bottle, whatever, to help stay alert if someone is trying to put something in your drink. But the other thing is, if you walk away from your drink for whatever reason, don't drink it. Get a new one, right? Get a new one. Think before sending or posting that risque picture, and I get it, right? You're at a party, you're having a good time, you're so proud of this cool picture that you have, it's kind of sexy. You want to show it to someone, make sure it's someone that you trust completely. And then even further than that, to protect yourself, is to just show it to them, right? Don't send it to them, right? You know how easy it is for someone to send that out and make that go viral, right? Respect yourself and protect yourself, okay? Don't be careless about your location on the internet. There's a check-in option on Facebook. I used to get on my daughter about this all the time when she was a teenager, about posting where she was at, checking in. This can really set perpetrators on high alert. They could be like, oh, she's not home, she's at this place, and your address, or they kind of know who you are, and so they go to your house and they're waiting for you, right, in the shadows. Or they go to where you're at because you just checked in, and they know, right, where you are. So please don't be careless about your location on the internet. It's too quick to do that, and it's so easy for perpetrators to be looking for their next victim in those cases, okay? Let someone know that you're coming or going, right? Give a quick call ahead of time to let someone that's going to be at the place that you're at know that you're on your way, right? Or give a phone call to someone else, right, that's not going to be with you, and saying, hey, I arrived safely, whether it's going to or from. The other thing that I want to recommend is there's many different apps out there that your loved ones can track where you're at from your cell phone, right? The one that I use is called Life 360, and I shared this together with my brother and my sister-in-law when I was living with them in Virginia, because I used to be my late husband who knew my whereabouts all the time, and he wasn't around anymore. So they became my safe people, and they literally were able to track. Doesn't matter where I was at, even if I wasn't in Virginia, if I was in Canada, it didn't matter. They were able to track me where I was at, and that really made me feel safe. Okay, so lots of different free apps, by the way, free apps out there that you can share your location with your loved ones so that they always know where you are. Make others earn your trust. Yeah, guys, please don't be so quick to trust. There's so many people out there that are waiting, again, to manipulate and to violate. And it's so important. This is something that I actually learned from Frank, my late husband, about earning trust, that people should earn trust and respect, and it shouldn't be something that you just give freely, right? So be always vigilant, always have your blinders off, be always aware about who it is that you are giving information to. And then create a plan B. I'm not going to go too much into detail on this, but I will tell you that there's a lot of resources online to create a plan B, and a plan B could be some of the other things that are above here, right? And so in cases where someone grabbed you or whatever, and you've got now your app and your family can track you, if they didn't hear from you at a certain time, make sure you're looking at the app and know where I'm at. things like that. If I didn't pick up the phone, make sure you're looking to see where I'm at. Like, have a safe person all the time that has your back. Okay. There's also the RAIN organization. I'm going to share that on the resources page. They have a nice section on their website that talks about how to create a plan B. All right, so as a community, what can we do, right, to do our part when it comes to preventing, minimizing, and putting awareness out there for sexual violence in our communities, right? So everyone has a role to play in preventing sexual assault, and there are many different ways that you can step up to make a difference. By practicing what we call active bystander intervention. Again, this is under the RAIN organization's website. You can find a lot of this information in there, right? Stepping in can make all the difference, you guys. It can make all the difference, but it should never, ever, ever put your own safety at risk. Okay, I can't stress that enough. So the first thing is create a distraction. What do I mean by that? Distracting in a subtle and innovative way. It's called intervening, right? The purpose of distraction is to interrupt the incident safely by communicating with the individual at risk, by giving them an opportunity to safely exit a potentially dangerous situation. Try creating a distraction as early as possible, as soon as you notice it. I'm going to bring up Frank again because he was very aware. He always had his blinders off, and he could always recognize when something was about to go wrong. And I don't know if he just had that intuition as well, but it was amazing what he could do and what he could see before it actually happens and remove us and himself from harm's way. So it's something that we all need to practice and be a lot more aware of. But when you create a distraction, it could be, just as simple as the next one here, asking directly, hey, do you need some help? Everything okay? And then, if the perpetrator, walks away for a minute or turns their back, maybe even mouthing something like, do you need help? Whatever it is. And so being able to ask someone directly. The other thing too is also you want to make sure that you're staying safe. And so you want to rally others if you can't do it alone, right? Because it can be intimidating to approach a situation alone. I get that, especially if you're, if you're a woman, it might be more difficult than if it was a man, right? So if you need to enlist another person or other people to support you in creating a distraction or getting this person safely away from someone that could potentially harm them, right? Ask someone to come with you to approach the person at risk. And then when it comes to expressing concerns, sometimes there's power in numbers, right? There's always power in numbers. So rally people around you. And, if things get really bad, we all have cell phones, right? Call 911. Do not hesitate to call 911. Okay. Now you can do everything possible to do your part, but something still happens, right? So the next thing that we can do, guys, for each other is just extend support, right? After experiencing such a situation, the individual at risk may feel panicked, be unsure about what to do next. Who can they trust, right? Extend a helping hand, be empathetic. It can really make a huge difference, okay? Your actions matter. All of our actions matter, right? Whether or not you are able to change the outcome by stepping in, you are helping to change the way people think about what their role is in preventing sexual assault. So if you suspect that someone has been sexually assaulted, there are steps you can take to support that person and show you care. And you can get, again, that information under the RAIN website. I'm sharing that in, I believe it's the next slide. So guys, it's so important. Let's rally together, right? This whole month is all about sexual assault awareness and prevention. And a key part to that is all of us as a community, as individuals, doing our part, okay? So here are some of the resources, and you guys will get the replay so you'll be able to take that, or you can take a screenshot of this as well. So what is the first resource? Your organization, obviously it is, right? Know everything about your policies, procedures, guidelines, who to contact, right? Know your organization. The next one is the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Anyone can call this. It's a toll-free number. Another resource is the EEOC, which is will help with sexual harassment, right? And then the EOAA, which is the Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action Commission. And they are the ones that actually help out with our college campuses, right? So the EEOC is for the workplace environments, the EOAA is for college campuses, and then obviously the DoD is for the military. This next resource here is the DoD Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office. That's what SAPR stands for. This is their website. And they also have a safe helpline and a safe helpline .org, which is like almost like a chat that you can actually go on and talk to these people on there. So you can call them, you can send them an email, or you can get on the chat. So there's 3 ways that you can actually communicate with them. I thought it was actually pretty cool. And then if you're a vet, the MST coordinator at your local VA medical facility can also be a resource for you. Again, MST stands for military sexual assault. And then the last resource here, which is one of my favorites, is the RAIN organization, that stands for Rape, Assault, Incest National Network. And they have amazing resources on their website to include all of these different organizations that you can actually reach out to depending on your place of work or your place of school or whatever it is, even to get help, you know, from mental professional if you needed it. And so they're a great organization. I default to them a lot for anything that has to do with sexual assault. And then, of course, I am also a resource for all of you. I'm going to be talking a lot about my programs and how it can help with the healing process. This is something that I wish that I had for me when I was first sexually assaulted at the age of 12. And I didn't know, right? It took me over 30 years to realize that I had stuck unresolved trauma and human emotions from what happened to me. And no one would know because I managed to go through life. But as I reflected on some of the things that I did, the behaviors that I had, the way I treated people, it made me realize that that trauma affected and bleeded from my childhood into my teenage life and then ultimately into my adult life. Many people experience that. So many childhood sexual assault trauma survivors are still dealing with that today. And really that is where my service can come from, is helping those that are still living with that trauma, the triggers, the pain, the nightmares. I really believe that the programs that I teach can help people in that space because it helped me. So with that said, I'm going to stop my share. I know that we are right about that time. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or would like to share anything, but I'm going to stop this recording.